Lila had always known there was something more to life than what her small town had to offer. Raised in the quiet town of Bellwood, where everyone knew everyone's business, life felt almost too predictable. She had spent her whole life working in the family's little cafe, watching tourists come and go, dreaming of something bigger. But at 20 years old, Lila was tired of being tied down to the past. She wanted to leave, to see the world beyond her little hometown, to become someone important. That's how she found herself at a city bar one evening, far from the comfort of Bellwood. Her friends had convinced her to come along, and despite her reluctance, she was curious. The city was bright, loud, and bustling with energy. Everything Bellwood wasn't. The bright lights, the music, the laughter of strangers. All of it felt like a world she only heard about in stories or seen in movies. Lila was different from most of the people around her. While others at the bar were wearing fashionable clothes, dancing and laughing without a care, she stood by the side, nursing her drink. She wasn't used to this world, but she was trying. Her long, dark hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, and she wore a simple dress that was a little out of place in the sea of designer outfits. But there was something about her that caught the attention of others, an unspoken confidence, a quiet strength that made her stand out. And then, in the midst of it all, there he was, Cade. Cade was everything Lila wasn't used to. Tall, with broad shoulders and a confidence that was impossible to ignore. He moved through the room with the kind of ease that only comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you want. His cowboy hat sat low on his brow, hiding most of his face, but Lila could tell he was staring right at her. His piercing blue eyes were like a magnet, pulling her in without him even having to try. She noticed how people moved out of his way as he walked, how the bartender smiled wider when he came up for a drink. Cade was important. He had money, status, and power, and everyone seemed to know it. Lila didn't know why he was staring at her, but it made her feel both self-conscious and strangely curious. He wasn't like the men back home, who were all about small talk and asking about the weather. No, there was something deeper in Cade's gaze. It wasn't the usual flirty look. This was different, as though he saw something in her that others hadn't. Eventually, he made his way over to her. "Hey," he said, his voice low but confident. "You don't look like you belong here." Lila smiled, not sure how to respond. "I'm not sure I do," she replied. She wasn't used to being so forward, but something about him made her feel bold. He chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "You're different." "I can tell." They talked for a while, at first about the music playing in the background, then the city itself. Cade spoke with the ease of someone who had seen the world, lived a life filled with adventure, and was used to people listening to him. Lila, on the other hand, had always felt like a small fish in a big pond. But with Cade, she didn't feel out of place. There was something about him that made her feel important, like she mattered for more than just the way she looked. As the night wore on, Lila found herself laughing at his jokes, caught up in the easy conversation. He seemed to know exactly what to say, making her feel comfortable even in a setting that was so unfamiliar to her. Cade wasn't like the people she was used to. He wasn't trying to impress her with stories of who he knew or how much money he had. No, it was his presence, his confidence, his way of being, that made everything about him so magnetic. But then, just as she started to relax, to forget the difference between them, he leaned in slightly. His gaze never wavered from hers, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "I have a smart tongue, so tonight I will have you," he said. The words hit her like a bolt of lightning. For a moment she couldn't breathe. What had he said? Did he really just say that? Her heart raced. Was he joking? Maybe it was just some kind of game he played with women, a challenge he threw out there to see if they'd bite. But Lila wasn't like the women Cade was used to. She didn't take such things lightly, nor did she easily let anyone take control of her. Her instinct was to laugh it off, to brush him off as just another smooth talker trying to impress her. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something different, a sincerity and intensity. Cade wasn't the kind of man who said things without meaning them, and that realization sent a chill down her spine. She wasn't sure what to say in response. Part of her wanted to challenge him, to remind him that she wasn't the type to fall for charm alone. But another part of her, the part she usually kept hidden, was intrigued. Who was this man who could speak so boldly, so confidently? Was he truly different from everyone else she had known? She took a step back, suddenly aware of how close he was, how powerful his presence felt. She wasn't sure if it was his words that had rattled her, or the quiet, intense way he was watching her. He wasn't the kind of man who would say something like that and not mean it, and something about that both terrified and excited her. "Are you always this forward?" she asked, trying to regain some control over the situation. Cade's smile was slow, almost knowing. "I don't waste time with games. When I want something, I go after it." Lila wasn't sure how to respond. She wasn't used to men like Cade. Back in Bellwood, everyone knew everyone else's business, and relationships were simple, predictable. But Cade, he was a mystery. There was something about him that was both infuriating and fascinating. And in that moment, she realized something. She wanted to know more. The days after that strange encounter at the bar felt like a blur for Lila. She couldn't stop thinking about Cade and his bold words. "I have a smart tongue, so tonight I will have you." At first, she tried to dismiss it as nothing more than a flirtation, a passing comment from a man who was used to getting attention. But there was something about his confidence, his certainty that stayed with her. She had never met anyone quite like him before. For days, her mind kept replaying the night they met, the way his voice had dropped when he spoke to her, the way his eyes held hers with such intensity. No man back in Bellwood had ever made her feel this way, curious, nervous, and strangely excited all at once. She didn't want to admit it, but deep down she was intrigued by him. There was an allure to Cade that she couldn't explain. Despite herself, Lila found herself checking her phone every few hours, hoping for a message from him. But nothing came. She had been waiting for him to reach out, but maybe, she thought, he had just been playing around. After all, men like Cade probably didn't chase after women like her. They could have anyone they wanted, and they didn't usually need to make an effort. Lila wasn't foolish enough to believe she was special enough to keep his attention. But one evening, as she was finishing her shift at the cafe, a message popped up on her phone. It was from an unfamiliar number. "Cade, I'm still thinking about you. I know you're not one for games, and neither am I. I'd like to see you again. Meet me at the ranch this weekend. You won't regret it." Her heart skipped a beat. It had been a few days since the bar, and she hadn't expected to hear from him. The ranch? She had heard of Cade's family's sprawling ranch, but it seemed so out of place for someone like her. Still, his message seemed genuine. There was no playful teasing, no games. He had been direct, just like when they first met. Lila hesitated. What was she doing? Should she go? Was this a bad idea? But something inside her pushed her forward. This could be her chance to step outside her comfort zone, to do something unexpected. She didn't want to live her life always wondering, what if? So she decided to go. It wasn't just about Cade, it was about her, about finally taking a risk, about exploring what lay beyond her small town and her quiet, predictable life. The weekend arrived, and Lila found herself standing in front of the massive gates of Cade's family ranch. The ranch was everything she had imagined it to be, vast with fields that stretched for miles, tall barns, and a large, beautiful home that seemed to sparkle under the sun. She felt small in comparison, like a visitor in a world that didn't belong to her. Cade greeted her at the front steps, his cowboy hat sitting low on his forehead, his tall frame more imposing up close. He smiled when he saw her, a genuine warmth in his expression that made her feel at ease, even in the grandeur of the place. "Glad you could make it," he said, his voice as calm and confident as always. Lila nodded, still unsure of what to say. She had always been a little awkward in situations like this, especially when everything felt so unfamiliar. But Cade didn't seem to notice her hesitation. He took her hand gently and led her into the house. As they walked through the grand hallway, Lila couldn't help but admire the place. The walls were adorned with rich dark wood paneling, and antique furniture filled the rooms. Everything about the house was elegant and luxurious. It was a world that Lila had only ever seen in movies or heard about in stories. They sat down in the living room, and Cade poured them both a drink. As they sipped their drinks, the conversation flowed easily. It wasn't awkward or forced, despite the stark contrast between their lives. Cade was genuinely interested in getting to know her, asking about her life in Bellwood, her dreams, her ambitions. Lila found herself talking more than she ever thought she would. She told him about the cafe she worked at, the people she grew up with, and her desire to leave Bellwood and see the world. She hadn't realized how much she had longed for something more until she said it out loud. Cade listened carefully, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're different from what I expected," he said. "Most people would be intimidated by all of this. But not you. You're not afraid." Lila laughed softly, her nerves easing a little. "I'm not afraid of you, if that's what you mean." Cade grinned, a knowing glint in his eye. "I like that. I'm used to people either being in awe of me or trying to impress me. But you're real. I can appreciate that." The evening passed, and before Lila knew it, the sky outside had turned dark. Cade offered to show her around the ranch. They walked outside, the cool evening air filling their lungs, and Cade showed her the stables, the horses, and even the sprawling fields where his family raised cattle. Everything was so different from her life back home, so wild and free. As they walked through the fields, the tension that had been lingering between them seemed to vanish. Lila was no longer worried about fitting in. She was beginning to see Cade in a new light, not just the wealthy cowboy, but someone who genuinely seemed to care about her. They stopped at the edge of the property, where the view of the sunset over the hills was breathtaking. The orange and pink hues stretched across the sky, making everything feel peaceful and still. Cade turned to her, his expression softening. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I don't invite people here often, but with you it feels different." Lila's heart fluttered in her chest. For the first time, she realized that maybe Cade wasn't just interested in her for a night. Maybe there was something deeper there. She wasn't sure what exactly, but she could feel the connection between them. Before she could respond, Cade took a step closer, his presence overwhelming, yet comforting. "I know I said some bold things that night," he said, his voice low. "But I meant every word. There's something about you, Lila. Something I can't ignore." Lila's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to pull away, to remind herself that she wasn't here to fall for someone like Cade. But the other part, the part that had always dreamed of something more, was slowly letting go of her fears. Cade reached out, gently touching her cheek. The simple touch felt electric, sending a shiver down her spine. "I don't want to rush anything," he whispered. "But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere." Lila felt her heart race. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but in that moment, standing in the fields with Cade, something inside her changed. She was no longer the girl who was afraid of taking risks. She was ready to see where this would lead, even if it meant stepping into the unknown.